It's an automatic door, and it's going to close here on our friend for a sec here. It's an automatic door, but that's not really the key feature, because that's not something we would do standard. What's standard is this part, right?
Yeah.
So this is level entry. So not only is, there's no step here, but we also drop this down. So when the door comes in, when we pour our foundation, we actually create a space here so that the door can
go
into the concrete. So otherwise this would be like 1.5 inches here.
Yeah.
Instead we try and keep it under a 1/2 inch. So now it's super easy to roll up and over, and we do that at all the doorways. This house is 4 bedrooms.
Oh wow.
4 bedrooms, 2 bath.
That's pretty.
No, 3 bath. 4 bedroom, 3 bath actually.
That's really impressive considering it's only 1 floor.
Yeah.
Like no basement, no second.
Yeah.
floor.
So there's yeah, exactly. So and then as you can see, everything is wide. Everything's just trying to be wide, even wide spaces. Between furniture, all that sort of thing. You're just trying to keep everything as open as possible. And then this is like a glue down floor product, so it's nice and smooth, easy to drive on. Fella that moved in here or built the place, his name's Darcy. He's quadriplegic, so basically means he has a high spinal cord injury, so he's lost a lot of feeling and movement in both his arms and legs. So there's unique challenges with that.
Yeah.
Right? So he has a full-time aide and needs an assistance to generally move anywhere out of his chair, right? Yeah. So that poses a lot of unique challenges for building a home. So that's where I mentioned about barrier-free design. Darcy doesn't need grab bars. He's not functioning with the environment that way.
Yeah.
Right? So he has that aide with him 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So the aide, it's more about what makes the aide's life easier to help Darcy, right? So we spent some time at the hospital with Darcy prior to building the house and seeing, what the nurses do there. How do they move him around? How does he shower? Bathrooms is always a challenge for persons with mobility issues. Every person is different. So how does he use the shower? How do they bathe him? That sort of thing. So that's why his aide needs to be able to hold his weight or lift his weight. So that's why we have a ceiling track that basically allows the aide worker to pick him up out of the bed. It is automatic. He's got a harness. They slide the harness underneath him. And basically this moves along the track. He can go right into the bathroom. Yeah, bathrooms are always very, very important. This is a barrier-free bathroom, which basically means we have a large turning area, minimum 5 feet of clear space to turn around. We have what's called a curbless shower. So there's nothing blocking rolling in and rolling out of the shower. No obstructions there. We have space under the sink, so you can get up nice and close. And just a personal preference for Darcy was he really wanted to have like a jacuzzi tub. So that's why the track goes right there, and he can drop right down into the tub or drop onto a commode chair to move about the bathroom. So that's, again, just something we work through, and that comes through learning a lot about our clients and what would make their life more enjoyable, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
People do not generally think about accessibility issues until it personally affects them. So it's that lived experience that gives you this greater insight into the issues. Where that becomes most apparent to me is when a young family or a young couple has a child with disabilities, and sometimes quite complex disabilities. It's hard enough to raise children in the first place, but if your child has a disability, it really rocks your world in ways that you just weren't necessarily prepared for. So for sure, that's a big issue. The second thing that I want to pick up on that you mentioned is this idea that when we do build accessibility features into our environment, everybody benefits, and that's such an important point to make. A lot of times we call it the curb cut effect, and because the curb cut is really the poster child of this idea of accessibility being um, what we might term more universal. So I remember being in the city of Edmonton as a young boy, having never seen a curb ramp or curb cut in my life. And when they first got introduced in the early 1970s here in Edmonton, my dad, again, being an advocate, was asked, what do you think about that? And just to kind of help you out, uh, in the old days, when you parked downtown, you parked by a parking meter. This this long object that was in the parking space, and you'd put coins in it, and and it would give you time to to go shopping. So he was strong enough to get his front two wheels of his wheelchair up onto the curb, and then he would grab onto the pole of the parking meter and pull himself up. And he was strong enough to do that. And so he often thought, if you're paraplegic, you can still figure out a way to make it work. But if you're in a power wheelchair, that's 300 pounds. You're not yanking that up curbs or anything like that. So uh, curb ramps really came into being because of people who used power wheelchairs, and it really started in Berkeley, California, with a group of individuals who used power wheelchairs that were going to university. And Berkeley still is today an area that's very progressive and open to diverse needs of all kinds of people. And so it became a home for people with disabilities to live independently as much as they, possibly could. And the city just didn't have curb ramps, so people in their power wheelchairs were really kind of the only way they could get around was to get into a manual wheelchair and then let somebody push them, which really wasn't fair. So having said all of that, um, curb cuts came to be the norm, which they are today. And I would venture to guess that somebody young working on the construction crew pouring the curb ramps probably don't even know why they're there. They probably thought they've been there since the 1700s or something. uh, um, but if you ask them too, they probably would say it's for parents with baby carriages or people with bikes or people with mobility issues. And I would guess that a lot of people don't realize the origins of the curb ramp. So it is something that's just part of our culture, and it's what we call normal, or however you want to put it, but it's not really considered an accessibility feature. And I'd like to see a similar situation happen in housing, for example, with a no-step entrance to people's homes. Why do we need the steps? There's lots of arguments why you need the steps. The one I dislike the most is for aesthetic reasons. When people say, well, the house doesn't look like a house unless it has steps to it. And that's a really poor reason to want steps in my mind. And seeing as falls are so prominent for people, especially our aging population, um, falls at home present significant costs to our healthcare system and so on, and our way of lives, and our ability to age in place, and our ability to age with comfort and independence and safety. Stairs just get in the way of all of that. So, that's something I've been doing for the last 30 years, is trying to convince our building industry that this should just be the norm. And that would be the sort of similar thing as the curb cut. Closed captioning was originally designed for people who were deaf. And so many features were originally designed to help our citizens with disabilities, yet we all benefit from them.
In the scenario of business, you're going to have more customers. You're not going to be excluding any potential customers. It doesn't cost you any more to an extent. It doesn't cost you a significant amount more to do accessibility from the beginning. However, when you wait and something's already constructed and you're receiving complaints and you find out later, someone can't get in our front door, we've got to now make these retrofits. Those are quite expensive in the end once something's been constructed. So it's really just about being future-proof, sustainable, and just inviting as many people as possible into your facility or business, whatever that may be.
Just to the viewers of the podcast, could you explain the difference between an accessible home, a barrier-free home, and a visitable home?
Sure. Yeah. So barrier-free is clearly defined. It's in the building code. So any public space that's built now has to be barrier-free. So it has to follow a very specific building code. Residential is not like that. There's no legislation that dictates, a residence, say a single detached home, has to meet any sort of accessible standards. It doesn't. That's why we've moved away from the term barrier-free, because barrier-free is defined specifically. For us to say something is barrier-free, we want to make sure it actually would meet all those requirements. But to say something is accessible, that's more of a loose term. Right? So like we were mentioning about how every project is unique, some of the features that are included in barrier-free are not necessarily ideal for the client. Some clients don't need grab bars, some clients don't need space under the sink or space under the range, or lowered switches or lowered counters, right? So these are all features of barrier-free design that are very clearly laid out. So we try and stay away from that term because you don't want to say something is barrier-free and it's not. Right? So accessible design is more what we do. So accessible design basically, it's almost self-defined in our field. So we have 5 things that we say has to be there. 5 design features. So those are level entry. So that means no steps to any of the exits or entrances to the house. 3-foot wide doorways everywhere. 5-foot turning radius circles for wheelchair turning, sort of in all the main living areas. 48-inch wide hallways, and at least one barrier-free bathroom. So that there's a definition of that, but one barrier-free bathroom. So if it has those 5 things, we would consider it accessible. And by default, that definition of accessibility also makes it visitable.
Right.
So visible means, if you have a friend, say that, I have a friend named Brad, he has cerebral palsy. Can Brad come and visit me? So can he get in the door? So that's where the level entry comes in. So yes, he can. And ideally, can he, when someone visits, they may need to use the washroom, they might move around the main area. So can they be at least as independent as any other visitor, right? So that's where the one barrier-free bathroom comes in, and the wider hallways and wider doors. So really for us, our version of accessible design and visitability are basically one and the same.
I actually was raised by a father who used a wheelchair. So in 1994, and we get to present quickly here, but in 1964, when I was born, in July, in December of that year, my father was injured in a work-related accident, which left him paraplegic. So he used a manual wheelchair that I just grew up around. So I knew my father in no other way than somebody who used a wheelchair. And in 1964, he was 23. He was hospitalized, of course, and basically told that you'll be lucky to make it to 50. Don't consider any kind of job scenarios, anything to do with like a relationship. He was married, of course, at the time, and any real kind of lifestyle, I guess, that we might think of. There was really negative thoughts about that he received from doctors and medical professionals and so on. So very different time than today. And then again, growing up with my father, he had to be very strategic in the way that he participated in activities with myself. So we would have to pick things that he could do as well. We had to be always super strategic about planning ahead as to where we could go, whether it was wheelchair accessible or not, various buildings that we would go to. We used to go bowling, 5-pin bowling, because that was a sport that he could participate in. Um, and just making sure that the bowling alleys that we went to provided some sort of access for him to at least get into. And in those days, he was young and very strong, and could manage to negotiate some bumps, but certainly steps weren't in the cards. And in those days, we relied a lot on help from others. So again, it just seemed like everything we did was a little bit harder than the average person, and that's kind of what I grew up around. Having said all of that, my dad, I guess, could have been somebody who um, didn't get very actively involved in advocacy and activism for people with disabilities. However, he did, and he when he got hurt, he was actually a grade 9 dropout, and went back to school, uh, got his high school degree through the NAIT program here in Edmonton, and then was in the University of Alberta when he got very actively involved in the student politics. And from there, it kind of led to getting more involved with civic politics and advocacy again for people with disabilities. And that led him to start running for city council, which he eventually did get elected as a city councillor, and spent 9 years as a council person for the city of Edmonton. He retired from that, and then a few short years later, ended up running in the 1987, 89 provincial election as a Liberal candidate. He ran against the then Premier of our province, Don Getty, and actually beat him. And so my father made it into the legislature as pretty much the first individual with a disability to be a member of the Legislative Assembly.
An accessible house looks no different than a regular house. You don't necessarily have to put the grab bars into washrooms, for example, if someone doesn't require them right away, but you can provide the backing in those walls so that you're not needing to rip down drywall if those need to be added in the future. Yeah, it's just a bit of additional space. It's making sure your doors are a bit wider. Everything you do for accessibility will benefit anybody going forward anyway. Moving your furniture will be easier, moving within your space will be easier. So there's nothing really different. And in kitchens too, just building, it's a lot more sustainable even, just having modular kitchens. So having your cabinets built in, modules literally, so you can take, let's say you need to take your sink module out. You can do that easily if you need to provide knee space for someone in a wheeled mobility device one day, without changing your whole kitchen or needing to rip out all your cabinets.
Going forward now, we always encourage people to do an elevator, or at the very least do like an elevator shaft, like a future for an elevator. And then what we end up doing is you end up with 2 stack closets. So, and then you do all the electrical, everything is there. So that if you ever wanted to add an elevator, you can actually just take out the floor and they just bring in the equipment. So at the very least, we always push for that. And most people are very receptive to that because it makes a lot of sense to future proof.
We all have different needs, but there's certain things like, again, the no step entrance, an entrance without steps. As the originator of this concept called visitability, Eleanor Smith from Atlanta in the 1980s, she said a no-step entrance just helps so many people get in and out of their houses and really hurts no one. And so there are a lot of accessibility features that are like that, where a shower area without any kind of curb or anything really doesn't make your life harder. In fact, it just makes everybody's lives easier. It's easier to like clean the bathroom after. You don't have to worry about a little curb that you could trip on. You can stand in the shower. You can sit on a bench in the shower. You can shower right from your wheelchair if you wanted to. So it's just like a really good flexible feature.
There's this one video I saw once where someone was explaining how when you create more accessible anything really, items or places or anything like that, it actually doesn't only benefit the people who need them, it also benefits just everyone, right? So for example, like the automatic doors, like when you slide them, it not only helps those that maybe are like a little weaker or just are carrying things and need something to help them walk in through the door. Would you say that there's something similar in this case where it's of course helpful for people with certain disabilities, but also beyond that?
Yeah, like so that's where it comes down to like a 55 plus home. So you know, you're getting close to retirement, your kids have moved out. You know, so what's our society's sort of third phase of housing, right? So you start out maybe in a townhome, you start a family, you move to a single detached home, it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2-story, you know, so and then the kids move out and now you don't need those 4 bedrooms, 3-bath. So what's the next step, right? And right now in our society, it's a bungalow. So people move to a bungalow, they have less space on the main floor, and generally your bedrooms are on the main floor. But the issue is that those bungalows are still up out of the ground, so they still have steps to get up, and obviously if you want to use the basement, they have steps to get down to the basement. So what we believe is that third phase, that third type of housing that we're geared towards, you know, persons that are sort of in the last third of their life, they should be accessible. So we shouldn't be building bungalows. Or they can be a bungalow, but they should be an accessibly designed bungalow so that they can be a true 55 plus home, not a home that's 55 plus until you're 75 or until you have to renovate or until someone falls or until, right? So, so they move into the bungalow, but after a certain amount of time, that bungalow becomes less and less functional. And there's nowhere to go past that other than some sort of care facility, right? Which seems very silly. So our argument is that there's a certain portion of our housing that should be built accessible to a minimum level or visitable, and that would be a massive change and improvement in the quality of life for so many persons, right? And you can still have a great space. So not only would it be great, like I said, for that 55 and up, 65 and up, but also for persons with disabilities. So you're actually adding a whole nother type of traditional house, right? So right now we have different types of housing. We have a row house, a duplex, a semi-detached, a single detached, but we don't have an accessible. There's a bungalow, but we don't have, there's a missing there, a cloud with a question mark.
Yeah.
Right? So there's something missing there.
Yeah.
So our argument is that by starting to build something that looks like that, then maybe people will see that accessible housing can still be beautiful. It can work for 100% of the population. It can still be for a young family, a middle-class family. You know, it works for everybody.
Yeah.
Whereas most of our traditional housing only works for some of the population, right? You know, if 25% of our population identifies as having a disability, well, traditional housing, you know, could very well be excluding a big portion of our demographic, right? So it's that cloud with the question mark. So having something that's now a standard that we build that just meets these basic levels of accessibility, doesn't have to be barrier free, which basically means a catch-all, and it barrier free, like I said, is a very specific checklist, and it has sort of a lot of psychological connotations to it. People picture hospital and, you know, but accessible and visitable, yeah, it's very it's very close to what we build. It's just a few minor tweaks. So and it needs a name, and it should be a standard type of home. So when that person says we don't need 4 bedrooms, 3 bath anymore, we need we need not a bungalow, because we know that's not going to help us age in place, right? So we're going to look at this alternative type of housing, which is an accessible house. And once those units are built, they're there forever, right? Just like a traditional home, you build it with 4 steps. It'll always have 4 steps to get to the front door. It'll never not have 4 steps. And you build something accessible, it'll always be accessible. So it might be for someone that doesn't have a disability at first, but it's a piece of infrastructure now, right? So and other people can visit and see it, and they say, hey, this is something different, this is cool, this would be great. There's no steps. If I'm carrying a lot of groceries, I got the automatic door. It's 2 stories, there's an elevator. Again, I'm carrying all these things, I can go right in the elevator, I can move furniture. There's so many great things about it,
Yeah, absolutely.
but it's just not in plain sight. There's just not enough of it. So our hope is that you keep pushing, and the more that you put out there, the more it becomes commonplace, and ideally the more people see how really great it is.
Absolutely.
No, I know exactly what you're saying, and Adam's right. There's a long history, especially with like my parents' generation. So, the real being born in 64, I'm considered the last of the baby boomers, right? That 1964 is considered the last year. So people older than me and my parents' age, uh, fiercely independent in the way that they were brought up and raised, and this idea that they need help, like a mobility device, like a cane or crutches, or a wheelchair, a grab bar, is just something that they feel, not only that they don't need, because it reminds them that they're getting older and they're more vulnerable, um, but they're also largely influenced by what they perceive others might think about them, right? So a lot of people like my age that I've talked to about their own parents, and they go, my mom, she won't put a grab bar beside her toilet in her bathroom, because then the neighbor Martha's going to come and see that I have a grab bar in my bathroom, and she's going to know I'm old. Martha knows you're old. It's okay. It's okay. So there is that kind of attitude that you fight for sure. Um, that's kind of something we can have a chuckle about, I guess, and kind of push away to the side as not super important. But it does definitely translate into a more cultural overall thing in terms of the way we look at a property and real estate and all the rest. So definitely, even to this day, um, the idea that you are trying to sell a home that's accessible is generally perceived by the public as a less than good house, right? So or a specific house, like for only a small portion of people, but not a house that you'd want to have for yourself, kind of thing. And you really don't want to buy it because it might assist you, but then it's going to be really hard to sell, right?
Mhm.
So there's this, in the housing market, I think there's this idea um, of what we want and what we need. And what we want is shiny countertops and big walk-in closets and large jacuzzi tubs and things that make our life luxurious. And accessibility, it just has a negative connotation with luxuriousness, right? So I've done many luxurious bathrooms that are super accessible, that actually look way better than any bathrooms I've seen that are not accessible. Uh, but there's not enough of them out there to really have an impact, um, um, you know, kind of overall. So I don't know. I've spent a long time in trying to change that culture, that attitude, and it's sort of one building at a time, I guess. You just keep building and providing examples for people, and you eventually will hit a kind of critical mass of people that will have enough understanding that this is actually a good thing. And so you really want to get the market to not feel like they need accessible features, but that they want accessible features. And when they want them, then they'll get them because they'll ask for them, because they're not perceived as, just for somebody in a wheelchair. They're perceived as something that has a strong resale value and makes your life safer and easier and looks awesome, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a tough struggle to get there, right? And I was saying I'm kind of optimistic at this point with the way things are going in the sort of disability movement. Um, when I do my public presentations to audiences, I keep saying that it took a long time for us to really understand and appreciate that, climate change and sustainability issues are worth talking about and worth really taking seriously. And it didn't really happen until we did hit a critical mass of understanding. And that's not just that's beyond the experts. So it's just your average person out there can appreciate that climate change is a real thing, and our politicians know enough about it to talk about it with some real strong understanding. And we just don't have that critical mass of people yet in the accessibility world, right? So we still rely way too much on our experts to guide us. But we need just, the average person, the average homeowner looking for a home to to be able to go to a builder and go, yeah, this is what I need. I need an elevator shaft, or I need backing in my walls for, future grab bars, and just all these kinds of little features. I need a no-step entrance. I need a bathroom that I can have a nice big shower area in that I don't have to worry about ever in the future. And all these things should just be like common thinking. And I'm hesitant to say normal because I don't even know what that means anymore. But I think we're all different. So
Luckily, a lot of the people that we work with have passion for accessibility, and they carry us because they know that it's not good enough and they want to do more. I would say more and more we're seeing accessibility as a line item on RFPs. So developers are realizing like accessibility is really important. If you're, for example, a recreation center or a retail space, in order to get as many users as you want to be there, you need to be accessible. And it's not just people in wheelchairs. It's like you said, like your grandma, it's people with walkers, it's mothers with strollers. You break your leg and accessibility is important to you. You're a delivery driver and you need to get indoors with boxes. ADOs or automatic door operators are important to you.
The more you do it, the more you're able to find innovations. The more and more it becomes more standard rather than custom.
Yeah.
Right. And finding unique solutions to keep costs down, all those things. And we are doing some projects where it's just like I mentioned, where we have someone who has absolutely no connection to the disability community who has agreed to build a rental property that's very accessible. One with an elevator and automatic doors and everything. And that's great, right? And she has a passion for helping others. So it is out there, right? But until investors who this is what they do, they build duplexes, threeplexes, fourplexes, all throughout and acquire and rent in large scale until they start to see it as, hey, you know what, this makes a lot of sense. Until that happens, it's a little bit at a time, right?
Yeah.
But should it ever become even the same price or very similar to traditional housing, and part of that can come from municipal governments adding incentives to help bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Then you're really cooking with gas for sure, because because then it just makes a lot of sense. Why would I build a house that only 80% of the population can live in for a
Yeah.
rental? Why not build it for 100% of the population if it's the same cost?
Of course, yeah.
Well, why wouldn't you, right? And if someone that doesn't have a disability moves in, that's okay because that's a piece of infrastructure now, right? So they're not going to stay there forever,
Yeah.
right? And now it's there. And all of a sudden, persons with disabilities have an option. Do I want to live on the north side? Do I want to live south side? Do I want a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom? Do I want, all of a sudden they have options like everybody else.
But even like if you don't absolutely need something accessible, walking within an accessible space is actually a lot more pleasant because it's like you have those extra, like opening the automatic door when you have a lot of stuff you can bring it in, or walking around the island. I don't know how many times I've bumped into an island before, but not here. It feels like there's just more movement, more space.
I think we're going to keep moving forward. I think there's been a really big uptick in people interested in accessibility. The Canadian government is looking at accessibility a little more seriously now. I think as long as people like us, people like you, we're spreading the message, I don't think there's anyone that doesn't want to follow accessibility. I think people just don't know. They haven't experienced it. They haven't seen the way it affects someone. I think the more you can teach, the more people can learn, the more they understand. So I think that codes will continue to evolve. Hopefully, I would love to see a guideline be made law in Alberta. That would be great. Wishful thinking, but for now, yeah, I think just teach, learn, connect, network, do everything you can to teach people about accessibility. And I think it has nowhere to go but